First, we'll pay respect to our teacher, Most Venerable Kiribadgada Jnanananda Thero Pingat Loku Sainghanse, for teaching us the sublime teachings of Gautama Buddha. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the Supremely Enlightened One. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Meritorious devotees, because we were fortunate to be born in the human world, and not only that, to come across the teachings of the Buddha, we learned a lot that normally the people in the world are not aware of these things. For a person who has not heard the teachings of the Buddha, it's like living in the dark. You are born to this world. Imagine if you're born to a dark room, there's nothing for you to see. Can't see anything. You grow in a dark room. You eat, drink, and do all things in darkness, and you just perish in darkness. That's how it is for a person, for the average person who has not come across the teachings of the Buddha, who has not heard the teachings of the Buddha, because they are ignorant of many things in this world. They are not aware of samsaric journey like now we do, because we heard the teachings of the Buddha. We know this is not our first birth. We know that in this samsaric journey, we have gone through a cycle of rebirths again and again. It's endless. That we learn by the teachings of the Buddha. Or else there is no way for us to know this. And we also know that in this samsaric journey, we have suffered a lot. That we know that we have often been born in the four bad destinations. In the hell worlds, in the ghost worlds, the Titans worlds, likewise, in the animal realm. So we know this because of the Buddha, because he taught us. And Buddha also pointed out to us that there is a way to escape this suffering, because we are inclined to be born in the four bad destinations. And without eradicating the causes that take us in this endless journey, we can't put a stop to this suffering. So Buddha clearly pointed out the problem in life, and also he gave a clear solution. The path. He showed us the path to escape from this suffering. So now as humans, having the 6 faculties without any defects, and we also have the ability to understand things. We have the wisdom. That skill is there. We are not retarded. So this is a very rare opportunity that we have got to change this journey, to put an end to this journey, to alleviate and to eradicate completely the suffering that we have experienced for many, many years in the samsaric journey. So it's a very rare opportunity that we have to understand, and we have to strive therefore to make the most of this Buddha's dispensation. So that is why we learn these suttas, and we should try to live by the teachings of the Buddha. Then as disciples of the Buddha, we have a definitive chance of acquiring merits, acquiring powerful merits, and developing our wisdom in a way that it will help us to realize these teachings of the Buddha and escape this woeful samsaric journey. So today also we are going to learn a sutta that is very helpful to achieve that goal. And this whole practice is about nurturing, developing certain qualities within us. So we become worthy, we become ready, we become molded to realize the teachings of the Buddha. So in the suttas also we see the cause and effect phenomenon. If you have certain conditions, certain qualities, then that will give rise to more qualities. Likewise, gradually you progress in the spiritual path. So it's the same in this sutta, and the name of this sutta is Tayo Dhamma Sutta. So today we will be discussing this sutta. In English we say 3 things, because that is how the sutta is discussed. Certain things we should have that leading up to gaining freedom from suffering. So the sutta begins in this way. Because if these 3 things were not found in the world, the Tathagata, the Arhat, the perfectly enlightened one, would not arise in the world. And the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by him would not shine in the world. So Buddha goes on to say, monks, if these 3 things are not there in the world, there is no reason for a Tathagata, Arahant or Samma Sambuddha to arise in the world. And the teachings of the Buddha, Dhamma and discipline would not also shine in the world if these 3 things were not there to be seen in the world. So what 3? So Buddha points out those 3 are birth, old age, and death. Jati, Jara, Marana. So aren't these things that are there in the world? It is there, no? We see birth. Birth Buddha has categorized, no, various kinds of birth. Andaja. What is Andaja? Andaja upati we say. Andaja is when you are born in a
eggs.
Egg. Egg born. Then we have Jalabhuja. What is Jalabhuja?
In the womb, Bhante?
Yeah, when you are born in a womb. Then Sansedaja. What is Sansedaja?
Moisture, Bhante. Moisture.
Yeah, moisture in a wet environment, basically. You know, there's some moisture. Like worms are born in like drainage, like in say in meat, because there's moisture there. Likewise in a wet environment. Then Opapatika. What is Opapatika? Spontaneous, no? Who are born spontaneously?
Devas.
Devas. Ghosts. Who else?
Hell
And
beings,
sometimes
asuras.
Sometimes human beings.
Sometimes humans also, Buddha said, are born spontaneously. So birth is there in the world. You can clearly see. Then with birth here comes aging. Aging is there. People gradually grow old. And it is something that brings unhappiness, suffering. This gradual decay. You're born as a child, and over time you grow into a youth. Then from there onwards, with maturity, It's a decline, no? And there's suffering. And it ends with death. So it is because of these three things are there in this world, the Buddha arises. Or else there is no need. And he arises in the world and teaches Dhamma that clearly address this predicament of beings, this problem. What is the problem? This issue is that all that are born, they age and they die and they again reborn and they age and they die, and there is no end to this cycle. The cycle of suffering, not happiness. So it is to address this issue, the problem, that there arises a Buddha in this world and proclaim the Dhamma and discipline. So then Buddha says, if these three things were not found in the world, the Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, would not arise in the world. And the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by him would not shine in the world. Because then there is no suffering. With birth, there comes suffering and death. If there is no birth, then there is no need for this to happen. But because these three things are found in the world, the Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfect enlightened one, arises in the world. And the Dhamma and discipline he proclaims does shine in this world. So then, now we discuss three things, no? Jati, Jara, Marana, birth, old age, and death. Then Buddha goes on to explain, without having abandoned these three things, one is incapable of abandoning birth, old age, and death. As long as these three things are there, you cannot escape. You cannot abandon aging, birth, old age, and death. What are these three things? Lust, hatred, and delusion. Raga, dosa, moha. As long as there is lust in you, as long as there is hatred in you, as long as there is delusion in you, what else will be there? There will be birth. There will be aging. There will be aging and there will be death. Jati, Jara, Marana. So that is the problem. That is the issue. Because now, each and every time we are born to this world, the defilements are always there. Always there will be lust within you. No? Always there will be anger. Always there will be delusion. Lust, hatred, and delusion will always be there. And always there will be aging, decay, there will be always birth, old age, and death. Jati, Jara, Marana is also there. Raga, dosa, moha, it's also there. What is not there? The teachings of the Buddha will not be there all the time. Because the dispensation, the arising of a Buddha is very, very rare. So that is why this opportunity is very unique. Because now there is a solution. Or else you are born in the defilements, you are not aware of what is going in the world, and you are controlled by these defilements. And what happens? You acquire more and more demerits. Bad karma. And you fall to the bad destinations. Now think of this life alone. Up to this moment, how much wrongdoings you have done. How much negative actions, things that you regret now, looking back. You have done many things, no? Unwholesome deeds. In this life alone, a life to which you live like at most 80 years, a person's lifespan nowadays. And by the time you come across these teachings in this life, you have acquired a lot of bad karma by them. So imagine going through a sansaric journey where you don't come across the teachings of the Buddha. That is often the case. Very rarely you come across the teachings of the Buddha. So always the problem is there. Lust is there, hatred is there, delusion is there. But no solution. So that's how it's been up to this moment. Rarely does a person get the opportunity to come across the Buddha's dispensation. That we have to understand. And we don't know how long this opportunity would last. Because we don't know how long we will live. Do we have a guarantee? Do we have a understanding, a contract with the Mara that I'm going to live up to this point, this much of years? No. Any moment. You can die. That's the truth. Sarhan Nagasena gave the simile, just like fruits on a tree, no? They can fall any moment. Some fall when they are ripe, some fall before maturity, some will ripe and they will decay and then they fall. So we don't know. Like that, our life is also very unpredictable. Any moment we can lose this life. So that is why we have to understand it's very rare, the chance we have got. So as long as there is lust, hatred and delusion within us, there will be jati, jara, marana, birth, aging and death. So it is by eradicating this lust, hatred and delusion that you can put an end to the cycle of rebirth. So even in Sri Lanka, in the Anuradhapura era, because we got the teachings of the Buddha with the blessings of Arahant Mahinda, within 1,000 years in the Anuradhapura era, many became Arahants. Sinhalese monks, Arahants. Sinhalese Arahants. They realized the Dhamma, and many disciples of the Buddha attained fruits of the path. Because they were able to eradicate greed, lust, hatred and delusion by practicing the teachings of the Buddha. So the average person in this world, they are unaware. They have very limited knowledge of these defilements about lust, hatred and delusion. They don't know how lust arises in the mind. They have that experience, but they have no clue how it arises, how anger arises, how delusion arises. But we know because we have heard the teachings of the Buddha. And we know it's a defiled state of the mind. They don't. They welcome lust. They welcome anger. Like they even say, anger is a good thing. To react when you get angry, it's a good thing to vent your anger. They encourage that. They say, don't keep it bottled up. You have to express your anger, then you are good. Because they don't know how to control the anger, how to manage it, how to deal with the root causes, because they don't know how it is conditioned. Because those things are only taught in the Buddha's teachings. So we now know how lust arises. No? How does lust arise in the mind? Can someone tell? How does lust arise in us? Someone? Because we have learned this again and again. How does lust arise in you? Do you know? Do you know? You know? Someone, Alina, can you tell? How does lust arise in our mind?
Could it be contact, Bhante?
No.
Not contact.
Of course, contact has to be there.
Oh,
Just because there is,
ayoniso manasikara, Bhante.
yeah,
Unwise consideration.
unwise consideration. Then what else should be there? Of what? What do you consider unwisely? What thing?
Subha nimitta.
Subha nimitta, no? There has to be a sign that is pleasurable, no? Something that you enticing, something you desire. Subha nimitta, we say, sign that we consider to be pleasing. Then we have to think of that in a wrong way, unwise consideration. Like you see a beautiful person, attractive person, okay? Be it a boy or girl, you think, and then that is the sign. That is the attractive, appealing sign. And you can think of that sign in a way, you can think of the gratification of that sign. Then what happens? When you focus on the gratification only, then lust arises, because the two conditions are there. There is the subha nimitta, sign that is desirable, pleasurable, appealing. Then you are thinking unwisely. You are only focusing on the gratification, which is very minute, negligible. But the danger of it is asubha. You have to see the danger, asubha. That in fact, the truth is that body, that form is foul. You focus on the foulness, the true nature, because the beauty, you know, is only skin deep. No? There are 32 foul parts. And with wisdom, you contemplate upon that. That is wise consideration. And you see that as a asubha nimitta, not subha nimitta. You see its foul state. You see its danger. You see its impermanence. You say it is subject to decay and it's perishable. And there is something it is something that you cannot control. So when you see this, then what is there? There is yoniso manasikara, wise consideration, and asubha nimitta. Then what happens? Lust subsides. So this knowledge is, who taught this? Buddha taught us. Therefore, we know how to deal with such a situation. We are not, so we have control over when lust is over, when our mind is overrun by lust, then we can apply these teachings and then lust will subside. Same with anger, no? Hatred. How does a hatred arise within you? What are the reasons? Hatred?
Asubha. No, it's ayoniso manasikara and patigamiti nimitta, Bhante.
Yeah, there are 20, like others also should answer, no? So like patiga nimitta and ayoniso manasikara. There has to be a certain sign that you find that give rise to aversion, no? You find agitating. It gives rise to anger. There has to be that sign. It can be a person. It can be a person's words. It can be a certain situation. It can be anything that triggers anger. The trigger has to be there, the patiga nimitta, the sign. Then you have to think of it in an unwise manner. Ayoniso manasikara should be the unwise consideration. A person scolds you. No? You can think, oh, that person scolded me. And then you get upset, you get angry. But you can think, no, what happened was, there is the ear, there is the sound, the ear consciousness arises, then there arose ear contact. And this is an unpleasant feeling that arose because of the contact. So you are breaking it down and you are seeing the cause and effect phenomenon. In that way, you do not take that personally, because self-view, we think he scolded me. Then we get upset, we get angry. But wise consideration means, actually there is no self, no. You think of the cause and effect phenomenon. Then you will not cling to those words. Those words will not hurt you, because you have contemplated wisely. Or else you can Spread loving kindness. Again, you are replacing unwise consideration with wise consideration, and anger will subside. Because both two aspects has to be there for anger to prevail. Unwise consideration and patigha nimitta. And delusion. Delusion also, delusion is arrogance. Arrogance is also delusion. So like you don't see the reality of life. If a person sees the reality of life, would he be arrogant? Will he be infatuated with his beauty, his skill set? No, because he know this is something I got because of past merit, and I have to put them to good use, or else if I become arrogant and if I look down on others, then I will acquire bad karma. That is all understanding. That is wisdom, no? That is not delusion. He knows the reality of things. He understands the situation properly. So he will not be arrogant. He will be humble. And he knows that we all die one day. So we are equal. And why quarrel? Why think of us highly? Because I have also defiled state of mind. Others also have the same state of mind. So we have the same problem. Likewise, you think in that way, according to the teaching of the Buddha, will you be deluded? No. There is no room for delusion. So likewise, this knowledge is there because we have come across the teachings of the Buddha. And the average person, they are not aware of the danger of harboring these unwholesome thoughts. They don't know lust, hatred, and delusion are things that harm them. They don't know that when these things crop up in there, they are acquiring bad karma at that moment. And then they will have to suffer because of that karma as consequence. They are unaware of all this. Only we know because we came across the teachings of the Buddha. There is an instant, an incident that happened. So in a certain life, there was husband and the wife. And the husband did not treat the wife well. He made her suffer a lot. And she was really, it was very sad, her state. And she could not bear the way he treated her. And because of that, she would think, when we feel we are desperate and we think we've been hurt again and again, we've been harmed again and again, then sometimes we say, we express our anger, because we are so upset. There's a breaking point for anyone. In any case, then over time, when it builds up, when this ill treatment goes on and on, we sometimes say in Sinhala, we say, sahagahana. That means like we sort of, we say in English, you would say, damn you. That means you damn you means like in the sense you want to see that person suffer. You condemn that person. Because you are treating me in this way, I condemn you to a state of unhappiness. So that thought is what you call vihimsa vitarka, no? It is a harmful thought. Because with anger, you think, may he also be condemned to unhappiness because he is making me suffer. So like that, these thoughts arose in the mind of that lady because the husband was treating her badly. And they died in that life. But that doesn't end there. No? According to the karma they had created, this husband was born as the baby of this lady. And the husband is now he's got physical defects. So he can't, the child has physical defects. So he can't eat, drink. When there's some are retarded, then the mother has to take care of that child all day long, 24/7. And there is no life beyond that for the mother. So now, because she wanted to see the husband damned to, condemned to an unhappy life, now she can see it there, no? She's seeing. He doesn't know this is the husband from past life, but it is the husband now, her child. And she now dearly loves the child. See how the karma brings you together. And now she has to take care of. And you can see every day, no? Every day she wakes up and what she see? All day long, her child condemned to state of unhappiness. Because that's what she wished. And now she has to carry the burden of the karma. And the husband also is now suffering, no, in that state. Now that is how this karma is linked. And this is how we wander in the samsara. So it is because that is why Buddha said it's like the sea. If you become a stream entrant, Buddha told us no. He took a few drops of water into his palm and said, monks, if a person becomes stream entrant, the amount of suffering he has escaped from is like the waters of the four great ocean, while what is left is these few drops of water. Because he sees the way people suffer, no? The beings suffer because of their karma, their own actions. So for each and every action we do by body, speech and mind, there is a resulting consequence. Karma is accrued. And you see, in like, have you seen there are certain billboards? It's a huge problem in the world, no? Indecent advertising, where nudity is used to advertise certain things, and they use women as sex objects. And what happens when a person, the average person, sees this advertising? There arises lust in that person, no? It can be also be anger or delusion. Say lust arises in a person. So the bad karma that for those people they create by doing that. And a normal person, after seeing that, say if we see some, in Sri Lanka there is like adult films that they display with such billboards, and that a person having seen that, he would think, okay, I have to go see that, and they go watch. In this way they accrue a lot of bad karma because they don't know the danger. The average person doesn't see the danger of lust. Only a person who has heard the teaching of the Buddha, then he can contemplate wisely. He might see such an indecent advertisement, and he know when lust arises how to deal with it. But the average person, they don't know. Now think, have you like, there's sutta, no? Thalaputta Sutta, have you heard that sutta? Thalaputta Sutta. Let me bring up that sutta. Yeah. Now, actors is their profession, no? To act. And by acting, singing, they do certain things. But by doing that, what happens? Are they acquiring good karma? Are they acting in a way to subside? Do the actions help to subdue the defilements in a person? Lust, hatred, and delusion? No. So in this sutta, it happens. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Rajagaha. Okay? In the bamboo grove. Skiras sanctuary. Okay? It says here. Then what happens? Thalaputta. Then Thalaputta, the dancing master, came up to the Buddha. Bowed, sat down to one side and said to the Buddha, Sir, I have heard that dancers of the past who were teachers of teachers said, suppose the dancer entertains and amuses people on a stage or at a festival with truth and lies. So, when a dancer or actor goes on the stage, they act, no? They say truth and also lies. When their body breaks up after death, they are reborn in the company of laughing gods. What does Buddha say about this? Okay, so that is how their teachers have taught them that if you do this profession, that's where you will be born among gods. Okay, because you are making people happy. The Buddha doesn't want to ask the question. He said, no, leave it aside, Chief. Don't ask me that question. But again and again, Thalaputta asked the Buddha the same question. Where will that person be born? Where will we be born? Then Buddha said, clearly, Chief Thalaputta, I am not getting through to you when I say, do not ask me this question. So therefore, I will answer. When sentient beings are not still, when beings are still not freed of greed and are still bound by greed, the dancer in a stage of festival presents them with even more arousing things. When beings are still not free of hate and are still bound by hate, the dancer, or an actor for that matter, in a stage or a festival, presents them with even more hateful things. When beings are still not free of delusion and are still bound by delusion, the dancer in a stage of festival presents them with even more delusionary things. And so, being heedless and negligent themselves, they will encourage others to be heedless and negligent. Therefore, when their body when they die after death, when their body breaks up, they are reborn in the hell. I don't remember, there's a Pali term for the hell, Sahana or something. So they are born there in the hell. It's a particular hell. So that's where the actors, singers, dancers, that's their destiny. Why? Because their actions give rise to this defiled state in a person's mind, lust, hatred, and delusion. So in this way, then Thalaputta, then Buddha said, then if this person, being a dancer or an actor like this, suppose a dancer entertains and amuses people on a stage or at a festival with truth and lies, when their body breaks up after death, they are reborn in this company of laughing gods. If they harbor this wrong view that we will be born in the heavenly world because of the, an injured individual with wrong view is reborn in one of two places, hell or the animal realm. You know, if that wrong view, thinking I will go to heaven because of this, that alone is sufficient for that person to take to the animal realm or hell world. Then he begins to cry. Then Buddha asks, why? That's why I told you not to ask the question, why are you crying now? So then he said, I am not crying because of what the Buddha said, but for a long time, I've been cheated. I've been tricked and deceived by the dancers of the past. They are the ones who said that we will be born in heaven because of this profession. That's why I am crying. So anyway, he goes straight to the Buddha and he becomes an Arahant in the end. So that's now, because that's the danger, of not knowing. So if there are dancers, there are actors, there are singers, if they know this is what's going to happen to us, they will then and there give up the profession, if they believe in the words of the Buddha. And there's also this sutta, Kamma-nidana Sutta. In this sutta, Buddha said about lust, hate, and delusion again. It's not long sutta, so we can read that sutta. So here, monks, there are these three sources that give rise to deeds. What three? Greed, hate, and delusion are sources that give rise to deeds. Greed doesn't give rise to contentment. Rather, greed just give rise to greed. So because of greed, there again arises greed. Because of hate, there again arises hatred, not love. Because of delusion, there again arises delusion, not non-delusion. So that's what it says in the beginning. It's not because of deeds born of greed, hate, and delusion that gods, humans, or those in any other good places are found. So Sugati, or good birds, are there. They are not there because of greed, anger, or delusion. Rather, it's because of deed born of greed, hate, and delusion that hell, the animal realm, the ghost realm, or any other places are found. So if there were no these defilements, then there is no talk about the hell worlds. It is because there are these defiled states, there are the hell worlds. These are three sources that give rise to deeds, bad karma. Monks, there are these three sources that give rise to deeds. What three? contentment, love, and understanding are sources that give rise to deeds. This translation is not good here, like, so it's the opposite. Lust, greed, and anger is non-greed, non-anger, non-delusion. It is because of these good karma there are the heavenly worlds. There are the rebirth in the heavenly worlds. So you can see how influential these defilements are. It is because of lust, greed, hatred, and delusion that we are going through this samsaric journey, experiencing what? Three: Jati, Jara, Marana. So next, so that is a Buddha, to get rid of lust, he told us what? Asubha bhavetappa ragasya pahanaya. You have to practice foulness meditation to get rid of lust. To get rid of anger, Buddha said metta bhavetappa vyapadasya pahanaya. You have to practice loving kindness, metta, to get rid of hatred, anger. Then anicca sanya bhavetappa aspimana samughataya. Aspimana is like the self, you arrogance, that you think of a person as there's a person, and then therefore you always think of me, mine, and myself. So therefore you have to practice what? Impermanence meditation. Okay. So in this way, the teachings are there to get rid of lust, hatred, and delusion. Then Buddha tells us, without having abandoned these three things, one is incapable of abandoning lust, hatred, or delusion. So if you want to abandon lust, hatred, and delusion, then you have to first take care of these three things. Address these three things. What are they? Sakkaya ditthing appahaya, vichikiccang appahaya, silabbata paramasang appahaya. You have to get rid of self-view, doubt, and grasp into behaviors and observers in a wrong way. Silabbata paramasa, grasp into behaviors and observances. So without getting rid of self-view, doubt, and grasp into wrong behaviors and observances in the wrong way, silabbata paramasa, you can't get rid of lust, hatred, and delusion. So what is sakkaya ditthi? What is self-view? What is sakkaya? What is sakkaya? What is sakkaya? Sakkaya is another term for the five aggregates. No? Five aggregates of clinging. It's another term for five aggregates of clinging. So what are the five aggregates of clinging? Form aggregate of clinging. So how did Buddha define the form aggregate of clinging? What is this form aggregate of clinging? The definition is all the things, the four elements, and all the things that are made up of the form, four elements. What are the four elements? Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayu. Patavi is the earth element. Then we have the Apo. Apo is the water element. Tejo, heat element. Vayu, air element. So all the things that are made up of these four elements, and the four elements themselves are considered as form. So our body is made up of these four elements, no? Isn't that so? In our body. So what are the things we find that are of the earth element in our body? What are the things that belongs to the earth elements? Patavi dhatu that you find in your body, what is that? What are they?
Hair, nails,
Yeah.
and teeth.
Very good. So things that are, there are things, no, that is, what do you call it?
Gross things, but the things we can touch.
Those things are all the earth element. That means they will one day disintegrate, decay, and they join to the earth and become soil. So because they are gross, they are called the gross elements of Patavi Dhatu. Then what are of the Apo Dhatu that you find in the body? Apo Dhatu?
Urine,
Water element.
tears. Urine, tears,
Urine, tears, blood, saliva, mucus, all that, no? All the things that basically that what do you call, like they dissolve in the water, no? Things that dissolve in water are of the water element. Then we get what Tejo, heat element, no? What is the heat element that you find in the body? Heat element is because of the body heat, we can digest the food, and it is because the body heat that the internal organs work, and it is by like there's a process of rebuilding. These all happen because of the heat element. When these heat elements they changes, then we get sick. No, if it is too low, then you say it's cold. If it's high, it's fever. Likewise, the heat element is there in the body. Then the air element. There is the in-breath, there is the out-breath, there is air in your stomach, air that move in your bowels, through the veins. Likewise, all that is air that you find within the body is air element. Now, when you break down your body, it's like now we cling to this body, thinking this is me, mine, and myself. Then it becomes this form aggregate of clinging. This body, we cling to it. This form that is made up the four elements without seeing that through wisdom, that is in fact a creation of these four elements. If you think this me, mine, myself, then you are clinging to the form aggregate of clinging because you have failed to see the conditioned aspect, the conditioned phenomena of it. See? Then you cling to the form aggregate of it. Becomes the pancha rupa upadana khanda because you cling to it. Then it is form aggregate of clinging. So this view, thinking it's me, mine, myself, it's what you call self-view, sakkaya ditthi. That's how self-view arises with regard to the form aggregate. Then what? The feeling aggregate. How does feeling arise? You know, there are pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, and feelings that are neither pleasant or unpleasant. We say neutral feelings. And there are 6 classes of feelings, 6 ways where feelings arise. Feelings arise when you see a form, hear a sound, smell an odor, taste something, no? You taste something. Then you come into contact with things, something tangible. And then because of the thoughts that comes to your mind, the mind object, then there are feelings. There can be pleasant, unpleasant, neutral feelings arising because of the 6 senses. So for there to arise these feelings, what has to be there? What is the phenomenon there? What is the underlying factor, the cause?
Contact.
Yeah, contact has to be there. Without contact, there will not be feeling. And contact is unification of 3 things. It is something conditioned. Eye contact is unification of eye, form, and eye consciousness. Nose contact is unification of the nose, the odor, and the nose consciousness. So contact is conditioned, therefore feeling is conditioned. So when there arises a pleasant, unpleasant, neutral feeling, then you don't consider it's my feeling. I am feeling happy. I am feeling sad. I don't feel, I am feeling neutral. So you sort of, with wisdom, you see, no, there is no self here. Rather, there is a conditioned phenomena. That is the truth. So you would not cling to the pleasant feeling nor do you feel aversion toward the unpleasant feeling, or nor you'll be deluded by the neutral feeling, because you are seeing the conditioned phenomena. Self-view is without seeing this conditioned phenomena, you cling to that feeling thinking it's me, mine, myself. I, me, mine. It's I who is suffering. I who feeling a present feeling. It is I who is feeling an unpleasant feeling. I am feeling likewise. Then there comes self-view. That is the feeling aggregator clinging. Vedana, upadana, khandu. Then perception. Perception again arises because of the six senses. No? You perceive forms, sounds, tastes, likewise. So again, perception also arises because of contact. You perceive the things you see here, no, there has to be contact. The unification of those three things, as we discussed before. No? Then only perception. Then perception also is something conditioned. That is why our perception of things change. The same person, someday he can be a friend. The same person, another day can be your enemy. The love of your life you married can be one day, she can be what you expected her to be. Also, over time, she can be someone else. The people change. Or your perception of that person change over time. She can be a goddess or yakta, no? Or, yakini. She change people. Likewise, or a god or a yakka. So the perception of people change. No? We like people sometimes we don't. We like certain food at certain times of our life, then we don't. So this perception always change of the world, of even a book, of something we watched. So this is also changing. Why? Because impermanent. Contact is impermanent, therefore perception is impermanent. So if you see this phenomena, then you will not cling. Therefore, if you fail to see that, it is called self-view with regard to perception. Then volition. When there's contact, then there's the feeling, then there's perception, then comes the thought process. So all is there, no? And then you think, I am thinking this. This is what I think of that. This is how I thought of that. Then there's the thought process, no? And you cling to that thoughts. The thoughts can be pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. That clinging is there because of self-view, because you have viewed that as I, me, mine. But rather, it is also born of contact. When contact ceases, then the thought changes. That is why fleeting every moment, the thoughts are changing. It is split, because contact is changing fast. So in this way, if you fail to see this, then you fail to see this because of this self-view. So to break the self-view, we have to see the conditioned phenomena here. Same with, so then we have Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sanskara, Vijnana, consciousness, aggregate of thinking. Consciousness is also again conditioned of what? Name and form, Nama, Rupa, Pachya, Vijnana. Nama, Rupa is name. Name is what? Nama. Feeling. Nama is feeling.
Perception. Chetana, volition.
Contact.
Attention. Contact and attention.
Manasikara, mental awareness. Attention. So those four. Now, Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sanskara. Nama is Vedana, Sanya, Chetana, Passa, Manasikara. Those 5 things. And Rupa. Rupa is the 4 elements again. Because of these things, there arises consciousness. So again, what we have to understand, the eye, ear, nose, there are 6 classes of consciousness. Eye consciousness, ear, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness. Why does consciousness arise in the 6 senses? Because the 6 senses are born of name and form. So we have to understand this. Consciousness is also conditioned. Should not be regarded as me, mine, myself. So that is, if we regard in that way, that is what we call Pancha Upadana Khanda, the 5 aggregates of clinging. So getting rid of this view is, unless you get rid of this, we can't eradicate lust, hatred, and delusion. All begins with eradicating self-view, doubt. You shouldn't have doubt about the Buddha, his qualities, Dhamma, the qualities of the Dhamma, and of Sangha. You shouldn't have doubts. You shouldn't have doubt about the virtue that has been shown by the Buddha precepts he has enacted. You shouldn't have doubts about whether you existed in the past, whether you will exist in the future. Likewise, that is also doubt. You should doubt the teaching, you should doubt the practice itself. Like whether this will lead to Nibbana, is this the correct method, or is there anyone? All these are doubts. If you have doubts, then it's a fetter. Then you can't progress. When you become a stream mentor, these are the 3 fetters you eradicate: self-view, doubt, and Silabbata Paramasa, wrong grasp of behaviors and observance. That means you do not take up certain practices thinking this is going to purify my virtue or morality. Because you know the 5 precepts is enough for a layperson. If I abide by the 5 precepts in a way that I don't grasp to them, I know these are here for me to live a pure life, so that I do not have regrets about my livelihood. So you can be happy. You can have this nice feeling that I am living a good life, leading a good life. So you live without regret and remorse. So that is why there is virtue is 4. That is the reason for practicing morality. So if you eradicate these 3 things, then only you can eradicate lust, hatred, and delusion. Because you have to become a stream entrant. You have to enter the path, then gradually you attain the other foots of the path and become an arhat by eradicating lust, hatred, and delusion. Okay? So then Buddha goes on to say, without having abandoned these 3 things, one is incapable of abandoning self-view, doubt, and a wrong grasp of behavior and observances. So you can't get rid of these 3 fetters unless you eradicate these 3. What are that? Ayoniso manasikarang appahaya, kummagga sevanang appahaya, chetaso linattang appahaya. So if you don't, first is ayoniso manasikarang means unwise consideration. If you fail to abandon unwise consideration, then you can't progress further. Then kummagga sevanang is following a wrong path. If you are taking the wrong path, then again you can't progress. Third is chetaso linattang means mental sluggishness. So as long as these 3 aspects are there, then you can't eradicate the fetters of self-view, doubt, or grasping, wrong grasp to precepts and observances. So unwise consideration, wisdom has to be there, no? You have to contemplate with wisdom, because all the unwholesome states, they all stem from what? Unwise consideration. Because we learn with regard to lust, hatred, or delusion, whatever to arise, there has to be unwise consideration. So as long as there is unwise consideration, then there are unwholesome states will again and again crop up in the mind. And then you will take a wrong path. Because how does unwise consideration arise in a person? When you listen to the wrong Dhamma. If you don't listen to true Dhamma, if you listen to the wrong Dhamma, then unwise consideration arises within you. Then you lose the path. So see how Buddha has put these aspects together, no? Unwise consideration, following the wrong path, and mental sluggishness. From Avidya Sutta, it's said in the Avidya Sutta, Buddha said in this way, Thus not associating with good persons. Okay, becoming full fills up not hearing the good Dhamma. So when you associate with unwise, bad people, no, I mean first you see associating with good fill up. No, bad. When you associate with bad people, what happens? What fills up? You hear the bad Dhamma, and because of that, then there will be ayoniso manasikara, no? Unwise consideration. Lack of faith will be there. And because of lack of faith, then unwise consideration. Because of unwise consideration, then you can't practice mindfulness and clear comprehension. Likewise, then there is the decline. So then you lose the path. Thinking the Noble Eightfold Path, you might practice something else. Why? Because you heard the wrong Dhamma. Why? Because you associated with the bad people. That's the risk there. Asatpurusa Sevana. So, unwise consideration and following the wrong path, and therefore there will be mental sluggishness. Because when your mind is filled with unwise considerations and when you are practicing the wrong things, then there will not be the clarity of mind there. The clarity of the mind, the purity of the mind will be lost. And instead of the brightness that you get in practicing the teachings, there will be mental sluggishness. Because you are engaging in unwise consideration, you are following the wrong path, therefore the mind will be sluggish. It will not be sharp. Okay? So that is why Buddha encourage you to practice, associate with good people. Then when you associate with good people, you will hear the good Dhamma. When you hear the good Dhamma, then there will faith will arise within you. When faith arises within you, then wise consideration will arise within you. So in this way, you have to understand how these aspects are together. Okay, and how important it is to understand that this is again cause and effect phenomena. No? How we have to develop these qualities within ourselves, so we can gradually progress in the path. Now, up to now, we discussed first the problem is jati jara marana. No, jati is birth, then there is the aging and the death. For that, to get rid of that, we have to eradicate lust, hatred, and delusion. For us to eradicate lust and hatred and delusion, we have to eradicate the three fetters of self-view, doubt, and wrong grasp to precepts and observances. For us to do that, what should we do? We have to abandon unwise consideration. We have to abandon following a wrong path. And we have to abandon the mental sluggishness. Okay. Then Buddha goes on to say, with regard to mental sluggishness, there is a sutta. See whether we can bring that up. Yeah, Kaya Sutta, mental sluggishness. Here, to understand mental sluggishness, it says here, yeah, and what bhikkhus is the nutriment? One more, yeah, and what bhikkhus is the nutriment for the arising of unarisen sloth and torpor, and for the increase and expansion of arisen sloth and torpor. Sloth and torpor means tīna middha, we say. Lazy and lethargic state of mind and body. There are bhikkhus discontent, lethargy, lazy stretching, drowsiness after meals, sluggishness of mind. So these are things as a person you can experience. What? Discontent, lethargy, lazy stretching, yawning, drowsiness after meals, sluggishness of mind. So what fuels this even more, give rise to more of this? When frequently giving careless attention to them is the nutriment for the arising of unarisen sloth and torpor, and for the increase and expansion of arisen sloth and torpor. Okay? You don't think of it in a wise way. You think, oh, I am feeling sleepy. I have to go sleep. I have eaten too much. This is all unwise consideration. If you think, okay, now you mindfully understand, now this is state of the mind. I'm feeling sleepy, but I shouldn't give into this. I should arouse effort. Like then you are thinking in a wise manner, no? So then you can subdue and overcome that lethargic state. So that is how you have to understand the sluggishness of the mind. It says, lazy, stretching, drowsiness after meal, and sluggishness of mind should be overcome with wisdom, wise consideration, and effort. Then on Buddha says, then, without having abandoned these three things, one is incapable of abandoning unwise consideration, following a wrong path, and mental sluggishness. What are those three things? Muddle-mindedness, lack of clear comprehension, and mental distraction. Muddle-mindedness, lack of clear comprehension, and mental distractness. What is muddle-minded? That means you are not mindful. Your mindfulness is astray. Now, when we say mindfulness, it is not the mindfulness that you have when you do day-to-day tasks. Because in your day-to-day tasks, you have to go to work. Sometimes you have to prepare meals. So they also require certain mindfulness. Or you will meet with an accident, you will be run over. Why? Because you are mindful. You have to be mindful, to get to work without getting harmed, do certain things. And then you have to do certain precision tasks. And it requires more mindfulness and attention, If you are doing something, there are many things that requires heightened attention. But that is not the mindfulness we are talking here. This mindfulness in the teachings of the Buddha is that you are mindful so that you do not give into the unwholesome. With that mindfulness, when defiled state, unwholesome states crop up in your mind, you recognize, this is lust, this is hatred, this is jealousy, this is arrogance. Likewise, you understand the state because you are mindful, always mindful. And then you focus on your bodily posture with mindfulness. That focus, that is what we are discussing. You focus on your feelings, Vedana-anupassana. You focus on your mind, Chitta-anupassana. You contemplate upon the five aggregates of clinging, the Four Noble Truths, the four elements. That is all what? Dhamma-anupassana, likewise. So that is the mindfulness we are discussing here. So when you are muddle-minded, then you also lack clear comprehension. You can't clearly comprehend it. That means that wisdom factor is missing there. But when you are mindful, then there is a chance for wisdom. You clearly comprehend what? You clearly comprehend the defiled state. So these things go hand in hand because you are mindful. You now clearly see the state of your mind. Oh, this is anger. This is why anger arose within me. Because wisdom is there now. You are able to recognize. This is anger. Anger arose within me because I thought in this way. I should now think according to teaching of the Buddha. And when you are muddle-minded and you lack clear comprehension, your mind is always distracted. Mental distraction is also there. The mind is agitated. When the mind is agitated, what happens? You usually get upset, Angry outbursts can be there. You make rash decisions. You act impulsively. Why? Because of the state of the mind. The mind is distracted. The mind is muddle-minded. And there is no clear comprehension there. See how the conditions are there supporting each other. So you have to address these three things if you want to get rid of what we discussed before. What did we discuss before? Unwise consideration, no? Following the wrong path and mental sluggishness. For you to get rid of those three, you have to first address these three problems. What's muddle-mindedness, lack of clear comprehension, and mental distraction. These three aspects. So then Buddha goes on to explain, without having abandoned these three things, one is incapable of abandoning muddle-mindedness, lack of clear comprehension, and mental distraction. What three are they? Lack of desire to see the noble ones, lack of desire to hear the noble Dhamma, and the mind bent on criticism. So if you have these things in your mind, then you will not be able to get rid of your muddle-mindedness, lack of clear comprehension, and you will not be able to abandon mental distraction. That means if you don't like to see the noble ones, if you don't want to hear the teachings of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and your mind is, the inclination is to criticize, to find fault in the Dhamma, you might say like, no, that's not how I think it's true. I think these have changed over time. Who knows that whether it's true? Does that monk tell by realization? How do you know if he has understand? You have to first become an arahant to preach the Dhamma. Like that, all these problems are there. What? Because of this thing. If these things, they are there, again, hand in hand. No? Lack of desire to see the noble ones, lack of desire to hear the noble Dhamma, and mind bent of criticism. Say, if you drag a person by force to hear Dhamma talk, a person like who have no desire to see the monks or hear the teachings of the Buddha, you just drag him and take him by force. What will he do? He will listen to the Dhamma talk and he will find fault. That's what he will do. He will criticize. That's what they do. That's the mind bent on criticism. He will criticize. So that's not, he would not be elated by to the Dhamma talk. So you have to get rid of these three. Unless you get these three, then you can't get rid of muddle-mindedness, lack of clear comprehension, and also mental distraction. So to give up these three things, that means to give up lack of desire to see the noble self. So you say, without having abandoned these things, one is incapable of abandoning lack of desire to see the noble ones, lack of desire to hear the noble Dhamma, and the mind bent of criticism. So what three should you abandon? For that, restlessness. You have to abandon restlessness. You have to abandon non-restraint. And you have to abandon immorality. Those three. If you are a restless person who do not practice sense restraint, and you don't practice virtue, you will never go to see a monk. That is not going to happen. Like, even if you are taken there, you will always be trying to. We have seen, some people, some young youth come to the monastery, because their parents come, sometimes they have to come. They have no option. So they are very restless. Their mind, the state is very restless because they are not practicing virtue. No, they are not practicing sense restraint. So they fear to approach a monk. They fear to come to such a place even. They don't know how to be in such a place. They don't know, they feel very, they find it very difficult. They don't know how to associate. Like they feel like they're like ducks in a desert. So out of place. I have seen like they're visibly shaken sometimes. Why? Because they know that they are immoral. Their mind is always restless. And to be even in such an environment, they find it difficult. So if a person is always restless and he does not practice, restrain his senses, and he doesn't practice virtue, he will not go to see monks or hear to the Dhamma, and he will be a person who find faults, even if he does go to such a place. So, no, you don't have to have all these. Even if one of these qualities are there, he will not listen to the Dhamma. A restless person can't be there, no. If his mind is that restless, he can't sit and listen to Dhamma talk. Now, by this, you can understand that you have progressed, no? In the spiritual journey, like after this time, because you love to go to see the monks, listen to the Dhamma, that is there, no? Up to that point, you have progress, it seems. You love to hear the Dhamma, and your mind is not bent on criticizing the Dhamma. No? So to that point, you can be happy of your spiritual journey, I think. Because even if one of these qualities are there, you will not want to listen to the Dhamma. You know the Princess Kema, queen consort of King Bimbisara. He was a stream mentor, but Kema, the princess, was very arrogant because she was very beautiful. She had a very beautiful, she was very attractive. So because of that, she was arrogant. So she didn't want, because she was angry, like she didn't like Buddha. Why? Because she had heard that the Buddha always, he says bad things about this body, the beauty. He undermines the beauty. Like he criticized the beauty of people. Like that's the idea, he said, because that's what he had heard about the Buddha. So, you know, the Veluvana is very, the beautiful park. And that is where the Buddha was residing. And King Bimbisara wanted to somehow make her go see the Buddha. But she doesn't want to go to see the Buddha because of these conditions, no? Because she was not moral in the sense her mind is restless and she was overcome by arrogance because of this state. And she didn't, I think, if she had practiced morality, if she was virtuous, then she would have allowed to go see virtuous people, no? Like the Sangha, the monks, but that was not the case. So King Bimbisara, who was a stream mentor himself, thought, okay, I have to somehow trick her to go there. So what he did was he made, you know, there are certain, you know, the musicians, the king's musicians, he asked them to make specific verses about the beauty of the Veluvana park and sing them so that she would hear and she would be inclined to go see the beauty of the park from her own eyes. So this so happened and she felt like I have to go see the Veluvana park. So she entered the park and Buddha, and then she didn't want to go to Buddha. She knew Buddha was there. She went around the park looking about all the beautiful places and enjoyed the scenery and all that. And when she was about to leave the park, the king's main advisor, there is a royal decree. This was not there, but the king enacted just before she went to the park, that if you do enter the park, you cannot leave the park unless you meet the Buddha, or else you will be punished. Now she was trapped. Because this king's royal decree, you have to adhere to that. So she went to the place where the Buddha was. And when she was approaching the Buddha, she was stunned by what she saw. Because all she had heard was that Buddha don't like beauty. Like he always criticized beauty. Talk bad things about beautiful ladies. That's what she had heard. But now she saw a very beautiful lady that is far beautiful than herself was standing beside the Buddha and fanning Buddha. In fact, this is not a real lady, but it is Buddha's spiritual powers. Buddha made her see such a form. And seeing this Kema, she was astonished and she was entranced by the beauty of that lady. Then Buddha knew that now I got her attention. So Buddha gradually made that beautiful form of that lady to age. And the hair color did change its color, and the skin, beauty of the skin was lost, and gradually the form, the shape itself changed and grew old, and now until it decayed and only a skeleton was left there standing, and the skeleton also fell to the ground. She saw all this, and when her focus was on that skeletal structure, the gradually declining beauty of that shape, Buddha taught a verse. Buddha said the verse, recited the verse, and now because she was focusing on that, she was able to realize the Dhamma, and later on she became an Arahant. No? Skema, the wisest of all the bhikkhunis. So in this way, she was able to progress because Buddha intervened and got rid of these three obstructions: restlessness, non-restraint, and immorality, making us see the true nature of the body. So then next Buddha says, without having abandoned these three things, one is incapable of abandoning restless, non-restraint, and immorality. What are these three? You can't get rid of restlessness, non-restraint, and immorality as long as there is lack of faith, inability to grasp the meaning of what is said, and laziness. There comes faith. You have to have unwavering confidence in the Buddha's teachings, Buddha's realization. The inability to grasp the meaning of what is said. What is that? Wisdom has to be there. No? You have to be able to listen to Sutta and grasp the meaning of what is said. That skill should be there. And also if you are lazy, there is nothing you can gain in the Buddha's dispensation for a lazy person. Because lazy person lacks effort. And the practice is all about effort. You know, you see how in the Godika Sutta, there's a nice sutta, you can see the effort these monks put into the practice. Let me show that. Yeah, effort. It's a very beautiful sutta, Godika Sutta. Says here, thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. Now on that occasion, the Venerable Godika was dwelling on the black rock on the Isigiri slope. Then while Venerable Godika was dwelling diligent, ardent, and resolute, he reached temporary liberation of mind. That means he attained a certain jhanic state, okay? But he fell away from that temporary liberation of mind. And the second time, again, he enters the jhana, but again that state declines. For the third, fourth, six times this happens. That means he gained a jhanic state, but it is lost. The state declines. While the Venerable Godika was diligent and resolute, he in this state of jhanic state, but he again fell away from the temporary liberation for the seventh time. And for the seventh time, he was able to again attain the jhanic state. 6 times he failed. So then once he attained this state in the seventh time, he thinks, then it occurred to the Venerable Godika, 6 times already, I have fallen away from temporary liberation, from this jhanic state, okay? Let me use the knife. Then he is thinking like this is what he thought. He thought, so okay, 6 times this state was lost. Before I lose this state again, I should put an end to this life. I should commit suicide and try to realize the Dhamma in that way. So he was able to give up his life to realize the Dhamma. See the effort, see the longing to do that. Then Mara, evil one, because we are always attached to this life and to this being, this body, and to have such powerful thoughts, it's quite phenomenal. Then Mara, the evil one, having known with his own mind the reflection in the Venerable, so he read the mind of the Arahant, not Arahant, the Venerable Gaudiya mind. He approaches the Blessed One. So Mara goes to the Blessed One and says, "O great hero, great in wisdom, blazing forth with power and glory, I worship your feet, one with vision, who has overcome all enmity and fear. O great hero, who has vanquished death, your disciple is longing for death," because he saw now Venerable Gaudiya is going to commit suicide. "Your disciple is longing for death. He intends to take his own life. Restrain him from this, O luminous one. How, O blessed one, can your disciple, one delighting in the teaching, a trainee seeking his mind's ideal, take his own life, O widely famed?" Because Buddha, in this case, like normally it is not allowed to commit suicide. No? So that's why he saying, he knows like if he had that mind state because of giving up everything, he will realize the Dhamma. Mara knew that. That is why he's trying to stop this. Now on that occasion, the Venerable Gaudiya had just used the knife. So when this was happening, Buddha didn't intervene and try to stop, because Buddha knew by that way he will realize the Dhamma. Now on that occasion, the Venerable Gaudiya had just used the knife. Then the Blessed One, having understood this is Mara, the evil one, addressed him in this verse. "Such indeed is how the steadfast act. They are not attached to life. Having drawn out craving with its root, Gaudiya has attained final Nibbana." So he became an Arhat because he gave up attachment to all things of life. Then the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus, "Come bhikkhus, let us go to the black rock on the Sigili slope, where our clansman Gaudiya has used the knife." That means he had killed himself. "Yes, Venerable Sir," those bhikkhus replied. Then the Blessed One, together with a number of bhikkhus, went to the black rock on the Sigili slope. The Blessed One saw in the distance the Venerable Gaudiya lying on the bed with his shoulder turned. Now on that occasion, a cloud of smoke, a swirl of darkness, was moving to the east, then to the west, to the north, to the south, upwards. Likewise, a smoke, dark smoke, a cloud was moving here and there. The Blessed One then addressed the bhikkhus, "Do you see, bhikkhus, that cloud of smoke, the swirl of darkness moving here and there in all directions?" "Yes, Venerable Sir, that bhikkhu is Mara, the evil one, searching for the consciousness of clansman Gaudiya, Venerable Gaudiya, wandering. Where now has the consciousness of this monk Gaudiya being established? However, bhikkhus, with consciousness unestablished, the clansman Gaudiya has attained final Nibbana." So that's all effort, no? Then Mara, the evil one, taking a lute, yellow wheel of wood, approached the Blessed One, addressed him in this verse. "Above, below, and across in the four quarters and in between, I have been searching, but do not find where Gaudiya has gone." To which Buddha replies, "That steadfast man was resolute, a meditator always rejoicing in meditation, applying himself day and night without attachment even to life. Having conquering the army of death, not returning to renewed existence, having drawn out craving with its root, Gaudiya has attained final Nibbana. So much was he stricken with sorrow that his lute dropped from his armpit. Thereupon that disappointed spirit, Mara, disappeared right on the spot." So this is how they thrive to attain Nibbana in the time of the Buddha, because they had the confidence, no? If a person lacks confidence, he will not put the effort. The more confidence you have in the teaching, more effort you will put to the practice, because you know, if I strive, I will reap the benefits. That is why lack of faith, inability to grasp the meaning, and laziness, they are together here. These three aspects. So if you have faith, then you will not be lazy, you will have effort. And you will also, then wisdom has to be there, no? The understanding. If you can't understand the Dhamma, then you can't grasp the meaning, then it's lost. So these three has to be there, okay, for you to abandon restlessness, non-restraint, and immorality. Then Buddha says, without having abandoned these three things, one is incapable of abandoning lack of faith, inability to grasp the meaning of what is said, and laziness. What three? Disrespect, disobedience, and bad friendship. If these three things are there, you can't get rid of lack of faith. You will not have wisdom to grasp the meaning of suttas, and laziness. You can't get rid of laziness. What? Disrespect, disobedience, bad faith. These things, you think, these things also work in tandem. Think of your children. If they begin to associate with bad friends, what happens? They will no longer respect you. They will no longer be obedient to you. Now, certainly, my parents say, like, of children, they say, earlier they were very respectful and they were obedient. They always listen to what we say. Now they have changed over time. What has happened there? They are associating with bad friends. Because of that, they change that influence. Then they don't respect anymore. And they don't pay heed to the words of the parents. So these three aspects also work together. Disrespect, disobedience, and bad friendship. So that is why this practice always begins with what? Kalyana Mitra. You have to have good friends that encourage you to practice the wholesome, to abandon the unwholesome, encourage you to practice virtue, acquire merit, do meritorious deeds likewise. That has to be there. So if you associate with monks, associate with noble friends, then you will be a respectful person, a person with respect, and you will be obedient, not only to parents, to elders, to monks, and you will live according to the teachings of the Buddha. So these three things also go together, these three aspects. Okay. Then Buddha says, without having abandoned these three things, one is incapable of abandoning disrespect, being difficult to being disrespect, inobedience, and bad friendship. Disobedience and bad friendship. What three? It all begins with this: moral shamelessness, moral recklessness, and heedlessness. Moral shame, moral recklessness. So this is there even before Shraddha, okay? Yeah, Shraddha we discussed before. So moral shame and moral recklessness and heedlessness, that has to be there in a person, those qualities. That means there has to be a fear of wrongdoings within you. That fear and the shame has to be there. That you have to fear to do bad deeds, you have to be shameful also of wrong deeds. Because if you know the consequences from the teachings of the Buddha, you know these deeds have these consequences. Because like if you are a person actually fear the consequences, if you have the shame and fear of wrongdoings, then even if there are bad friends, they can't make you do bad things. Why? Because you fear, no? There is the fear and shame to guard you, protect you. Moral shame and fear is there. So then you know, this, if I do these things, these will be the consequences. Then what you do? Like if say when you are together partying, they might encourage you to drink with them, alcohol, to engage in sexual misconduct. When those situations arise, if you have moral shame and moral dread, then you would refrain from those acts because you know of the consequences. And then therefore you will be heedful. You will not be heedless. A person without moral shame and moral dread, and then he will be heedless. Then he will do these things. Because why? To make the friends happy. So then that will destroy him. So like say in the case of King Ajatasattu, the bad friend was Devadatta. And he also didn't have this moral shame, moral dread. Therefore, he fell victim to the bad friend, Ajatasattu. So in this way, this moral shame and dread are things that you should have within yourself that is going to protect you. If you have moral shame and moral dread, then you are a heedful person. That is where it all begins. Okay. So then Buddha goes on to say, because one who is morally shameless and morally reckless is heedless. This is how it happened. Okay. Because one who is morally shameless and morally reckless is heedless. One who is heedless is incapable of abandoning disrespect, disobedience, and bad friendship. Then one who has bad friends is incapable of abandoning lack of faith, inability to grasp of the meaning of what is said, and laziness. One who is lazy is incapable of abandoning restlessness, non-restraint, and immorality. Okay, because he is lazy. One who is immoral is incapable of abandoning lack of desire to see the noble ones, lack of desire to hear the noble Dhamma, and a mind bent on criticism. One who has a mind bent on criticism is incapable of abandoning muddle-mindedness, lack of clear comprehension, and mental distraction. One who is mentally distracted is incapable of abandoning unwise consideration, following a wrong path, and mental sluggishness. One who is mentally sluggish is incapable of abandoning self-view, doubt, and wrong grasp of behavior and observance. One who has doubt and doubt and wrong grasp of behaviors and observance. One who has doubt is incapable of abandoning lust, hatred, and delusion. Because when you have lust, when you have doubt, then you will not practice. You don't have belief in the Buddha, his teachings. Therefore, you can't abandon lust, hatred, and delusion. Without having abandoned lust, hatred, and delusion, one is incapable of abandoning birth, old age, and death. So if we are to abandon, because one who has a sense of moral shame and moral dread, he will be heedful, the opposite. One who is heedful is capable of abandoning disrespect, disobedience, and bad friendship. One who has good friends is capable of abandoning lack of faith, inability to grasp the meaning of what is said, and laziness. So he is not lazy anymore, okay? Because he is not lazy, then he is energetic. No? One who is energetic, that means he is always constantly putting the effort. He is capable of abandoning restlessness, non-restraint, and immorality, because they all require effort. One who is virtuous is capable of abandoning lack of desire to see the noble ones, because it says no, a virtuous person can approach any assembly without fear. So he approaches the monks, desire to see the noble. He allowed to see virtuous people, to be among virtuous people. So one who is virtuous is capable of abandoning lack of desire to see the noble ones, lack of desire to hear the noble Dhamma, and mind bent on criticism. One whose mind is not bent on criticism is capable of abandoning muddle-mindedness, lack of clear comprehension, and mental distraction. One who has an undistracted mind is capable of abandoning unwise consideration, following a wrong path, and mental sluggishness. One who has an unsluggish mind, he has a bright mind now, is capable of abandoning self-view, doubt, and wrong grasp of fear. Then only you can abandon the three fetters, because now your mind is not sluggish, it's very sharp. Okay, it's got a sharp mind. One without doubt is capable of abandoning lust, hatred, and delusion. Having abandoned lust, hatred, and delusion, one is capable of abandoning birth, old age, and death. So you see how the cause and effect phenomena is there throughout the sutta, and how a disciple gradually progress in the spiritual path. So these, you see, these are all qualities. No? The qualities, there are qualities that the person has to develop within oneself so that he will progress in the path shown by the Buddha.